You need to get up. Now. That seat is for the owner of this aircraft, not the help." Those were the words Captain Brock Holloway sneered at the woman in the faded grey hoodie, pointing a gloved finger toward the cramped jump seat near the galley. He saw a nuisance. He saw a nobody. What he didn't see was the woman who had just signed the $65 million check for the Bombardier Global 7500 he was standing in. He didn't know that with one phone call, she could ground him for life. Today, at 40,000 feet, Captain Holloway is about to learn the most expensive lesson of his career: never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the library. This is the story of how arrogance met its match, and the karma was absolute. The rain at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey was relentless, a grey curtain that turned the tarmac into a slick obsidian mirror. It was the kind of weather that made lesser pilots nervous, but Captain Brock Holloway wasn't a lesser pilot. He was, in his own estimation, a god of the sky. He stood under the shelter of the FBO's awning, adjusting the cuffs of his pristine uniform. He checked his reflection in the glass doors of the private terminal. Perfect. Jawline sharp silver wings, gleaming tie, knotted with a mathematical precision that suggested a man who did not tolerate errors. "Captain Holloway." Brock didn't turn immediately. He finished inspecting his teeth in the reflection before pivoting to face the young first officer Kevin, who looked like he was drowning in his oversized blazer. "What is it, Kevin?" Brock asked, his voice a low rumble of annoyance. "The catering is loaded, sir, and the fuel truck just pulled away. We're ready for the pre-flight checks on the Obsidian Horizon." Brock nodded, suppressing a smirk. The Obsidian Horizon. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a brand-new Bombardier Global 7500. It had the range to fly from New York to Hong Kong without stopping to catch its breath. It featured a master suite, a conference room, and a Newage seat collection that cost more than Brock's first house. It was currently being leased out for charter, while the ownership papers were being finalized in some high-rise boardroom in Manhattan. Brock knew the drill. Today they were flying a VIP client to London, a Mr. Preston Valcourt. Oil money, or maybe crypto. Brock didn't care where the money came from, as long as the tips were heavy and the champagne was cold. "I'll handle the internal inspection," Brock said, stepping out into the rain, ignoring the umbrella Kevin offered. "You check the landing gear, and try not to look so wet. It's unprofessional." Brock strode across the tarmac, the rain parting around him, like he commanded the elements. He climbed the air stairs of the massive jet, feeling the familiar hum of the Auxiliary Power Unit APU vibrating through the soles of his shoes. This was his kingdom. He stepped inside the cabin. The air smelled of fresh leather and expensive bergamot sanitizer. The lighting was dimmed to a warm, inviting amber. And then he saw it. Or rather, her. Sitting in the principal seat, the starboard single club seat legally designated for the primary passenger during takeoff, was a woman. She was an anomaly in this temple of luxury. She wore a pair of loose-fitting black joggers and a grey oversized hoodie that looked like it had been washed 100 times. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, secured by a simple elastic band. On her feet were worn-out sneakers, the white rubber scuffed grey. She had an iPad propped up on her knees and was typing furiously, a pair of noise-cancelling headphones around her neck. Brock froze. His eyes narrowed. He knew the manifest. Mr. Preston Valcourt. One passenger. Male. This person was definitely not Mr. Preston Valcourt. The rage simmered in Brock's gut instantly. He hated disorder. He hated when the FBO staff let their guard down. This had to be one of Valcourt's staff members, a nanny, a personal assistant, maybe a chef who had boarded early to get comfortable before the boss arrived. He hated the entitlement of the help. He marched down the aisle, his footsteps heavy on the plush carpet. The woman didn't look up. She was engrossed in whatever data was scrolling across her screen. Brock stopped right beside her seat. He loomed over her, casting a shadow that blocked the reading light. "Excuse me," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a command. The woman stopped typing. She didn't jump or flinch. She simply finished the sentence she was writing, tapped the screen, and then slowly looked up. Her eyes were dark, calm, and unsettlingly intelligent. There was no panic in them, no scramble to apologize for being caught. "Yes," she said. Her voice was soft, melodic, but it carried a weight that Brock chose to ignore. "You're in the wrong seat," Brock said, pointing a finger toward the back of the plane. "The galley jump seat is back there. Or you can sit in the aft lavatory for all I care. But this seat, this is for the principal." The woman blinked a slow, deliberate motion. "The principal." "Mr. Valcourt." Brock snapped. "The man paying for this flight, the man whose schedule runs my clock. I assume you're part of his entourage, the nanny, the dog walker." A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of the woman's mouth. "I'm Ivana," she said, extending a hand. "I'm not the nanny." Brock ignored the hand. He looked at it like it was covered in sludge. "I don't care if you're his spiritual advisor, Ivana. Get up. Mr. Valcourt will be here in 20 minutes. I want this cabin pristine. That means no clutter, and certainly no staff lounging in the master seat wearing that." He gestured vaguely at her hoodie. Ivana withdrew her hand, resting it back on her iPad. "I prefer this seat. It has the best view of the leading edge slats. I like to watch the hydraulics engage during takeoff." Brock laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, you like to watch the hydraulics? That's cute. Listen to me, sweetheart. I don't have time to explain aerodynamics to the help. This is a $50 million aircraft, not a Greyhound bus. You are damaging the leather with those jeans." "They're cotton joggers," Ivana corrected gently. "And they're very soft." "Move," Brock hissed, leaning in closer, invading her personal space. "Now, before I call security and have you dragged off this plane for trespassing. If you want to fly to London, you will sit in the back, keep your mouth shut, and speak only when spoken to. Do we understand each other?" Ivana looked at him. For a second, Brock felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the way she studied him, like a scientist, examining a particularly fascinating, yet repulsive insect. "Oh, we understand each other perfectly, Captain," Ivana said. She closed her iPad cover with a soft snap. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She was taller than he expected, though still shorter than him. She picked up her battered canvas tote bag. "Excellent," Brock said, brushing invisible dust off the headrest where she had been sitting. "The jump seat is behind the galley curtain. Try to stay out of sight." Ivana didn't argue. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked past him, her sneakers silent on the carpet, and disappeared behind the heavy velvet curtain separating the main cabin from the crew galley. Brock exhaled, straightening his tie. He pulled a bottle of sanitizer from his pocket and aggressively wiped down the armrests she had touched. "Unbelievable," he muttered to himself. "They let anyone on these days." He had no idea that the woman he had just banished to the crew seat had just sent a text message. It was a single line sent to the CEO of the aircraft management company. "Pilot is hostile. Let the play continue. I want to see how far he goes." 10 minutes later, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted from tense silence to chaotic noise. "Careful with that. That's Louis Vuitton, you moron. Not a gym bag," the voice boomed from the entryway. Brock immediately put on his best customer service smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes, and stepped forward to greet the real passenger. Preston Valcourt was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in insecurity and hair gel. He was in his late 20s, wearing a suit that was too tight, a watch that was too big, and cologne that was too strong. He stormed onto the plane, followed by a beleaguered-looking assistant, carrying 3 massive suitcases. "Mr. Valcourt," Brock said smoothly, offering a slight bow. "Welcome aboard the Obsidian Horizon. I'm Captain Holloway. It's an honor to be flying you to London tonight." Preston stopped, looking Brock up and down. He chewed on a toothpick, though there was no food in sight. "Holloway, right. Make it smooth, yeah. Last time I flew private, the pilot hit a bump over the Atlantic and I spilled my scotch. I don't like spilling scotch." "I assure you, sir," Brock said, his voice dripping with sycophancy, "I have plotted a course to avoid all major turbulence. You'll barely know we're moving." "Good." Preston threw his coat at his assistant without looking. "Where's the champagne? I specifically asked for the vintage Dom." "Chilled and waiting at your seat, sir." Brock gestured to the seat Ivana had just vacated. Preston flopped into the seat, kicking his legs out. He didn't take off his muddy designer boots. He ground the heels directly into the pristine beige carpet. Brock twitched but said nothing. This was money. You didn't correct money. "Who's the girl?" Preston asked, suddenly pointing toward the galley curtain. Brock froze. The curtain was slightly open. Ivana was visible, sitting quietly on the small, uncomfortable fold-down seat, reading a book. "Ah." Brock lowered his voice, confidentially. "Apologies, Mr. Valcourt. That is, additional staff. She was already on board when I arrived. I assumed she was with your party." Preston squinted at Ivana. "My party? I didn't hire a scrub. Look at her. She looks like she crawled out of a dumpster." He laughed loudly at his own joke. Brock chuckled along a nervous, jagged sound. "Right. Very good, sir. I believe she's a technical observer from the leasing company, just hitching a ride to London for maintenance logistics. I've already instructed her to stay out of your way." Technically, this was a lie. Brock didn't know who she was, but he couldn't admit to the VIP that he had a stowaway he hadn't fully vetted. That would look incompetent. Whatever. Preston waved his hand dismissively. "As long as she doesn't ask for an autograph. I hate when fans get clingy. I will ensure she remains invisible, sir." Brock turned and marched to the galley. He yanked the curtain aside. Ivana looked up from her book. It was a paperback on Stoic philosophy. "You," Brock whispered harshly. "The client is asking questions. Keep the curtain closed. If you need to use the restroom, you wait until he's asleep. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak to him. You are a ghost." "Got it." Ivana looked past Brock, her eyes landing on Preston, who was currently snapping his fingers at the flight attendant, demanding she peel his grapes. "He seems charming," Ivana noted dryly. "He is the man paying my salary." Brock spat. "Which is more than I can say for you. Kevin tells me your name wasn't on the catering manifest either, so don't expect a meal." "I brought a granola bar," Ivana said, tapping her pocket. "I'll survive." "Pathetic," Brock sneered. He yanked the curtain shut, plunging her into the semi-darkness of the galley. Back in the cockpit, Brock settled into the left seat, the captain's throne. Kevin was already strapped in, running through the checklist. "Door is sealed," Kevin said. "Sir, about the passenger in the jump seat." "Drop it, Kevin," Brock growled as he began flipping switches. "It's just, I saw her ID when she boarded earlier." Kevin pressed, looking uneasy. "I didn't get a good look at the name, but the clearance level code on her badge was—" Kevin Brock snapped, turning to glare at his co-pilot. "She's a freeloader. Probably some diversity hire from corporate, sent to audit our fuel consumption. I've seen it 1,000,000 times. They send these nobodies to spy on us, trying to cut costs. The best way to handle them is to show them who runs the show. Now call the tower. I want to be wheels up in 5 minutes. Kevin hesitated, his mouth opening as if to argue, but he saw the fire in Brock's eyes and thought better of it. He keyed the mic. Teterboro Tower, this is Global 7500, ready for taxi. As the engines roared to life, screaming with enough thrust to shake the rain off the wings, Brock felt that familiar surge of power. He was in control. The rich idiot in the back was happy the scrub in the galley was contained, and he was flying the most beautiful machine in the sky. He had no idea that the scrub in the galley was currently monitoring the engine telemetry on her phone, noting that Brock was running the number 2 engine slightly hot during the start sequence. She made a mental note. Impatience. Bad for the turbine blades. 2 hours into the flight, the Atlantic Ocean was a pitch-black void beneath them. The obsidian horizon was cruising at Mach 0.85, a smooth silver bullet piercing the night. In the cabin, Preston Valcourt was 3 bottles of Dom Perignon deep and had decided that the flight attendant, a terrified young woman named Sarah, was his personal entertainment. "Come on, just 1 shot," Preston slurred, holding out a glass. "It's boring drinking alone." "I'm sorry, sir, I'm on duty," Sarah said, her voice trembling. She backed away toward the galley. "Duty schmooty." Preston laughed, lurching out of his seat. "You're on my plane. I bought the time. That means I bought you." He reached out and grabbed her wrist. Sarah gasped, dropping the silver tray she was holding. It clattered onto the floor with a deafening crash. In the galley, Ivana had been listening. She had tolerated the insults to herself. She had tolerated the uncomfortable seat. She had tolerated the hunger. But she did not tolerate bullies. She stood up. She didn't look like a billionaire. She looked like an angry woman in a hoodie. And that was dangerous enough. She ripped the curtain open. "Let go of her," Ivana said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the cabin noise like a razor wire. Preston blinked, looking at the woman standing in the galley entrance. He laughed. "Oh, look, the ghost speaks. What are you going to do, tech support? Reboot me." He tightened his grip on Sarah's wrist. Sarah whimpered. Ivana stepped forward. She didn't rush. She moved with the terrifying calmness of someone who knows exactly how a confrontation ends. "I said," Ivana repeated, "let her go." "Captain," Preston shouted, not looking away from Ivana. "Captain Holloway, get your trash under control." The cockpit door opened instantly. Brock had been monitoring the cabin camera. He stormed out, his face purple with rage. He saw the scene, the wealthy client standing up the flight attendant crying, and the scrub in the hoodie stepping out of her designated zone. He didn't assess the situation. He didn't ask what happened. He defaulted to the hierarchy he believed in. Money is right. No, money is wrong. "You," Brock roared, pointing at Ivana. "Sit down. You are interfering with a VIP passenger. He's assaulting a crew member," Ivana said, calmly, pointing to Preston's hand on Sarah's wrist. "He's just having fun," Brock yelled. He turned to Preston, his voice softening instantly. "Mr. Valcourt, please accept my apologies. She's unstable. I'll handle this." He turned back to Ivana, his eyes bulging. "Get back in the jump seat, now, or so help me God, I will divert this plane to Newfoundland and have the RCMP drag you off in handcuffs." Ivana looked at Brock, really looked at him. She saw the fear behind the arrogance. She saw a man so desperate to please power that he had abandoned his duty to protect his crew. "You'd divert?" Ivana asked. "That's an expensive decision, Captain. Fuel dump alone would cost $20,000. Landing fees. Crew timeout." "Not your money, not your problem." Brock spat. "Sit down." Preston shoved Sarah away. Yeah, sit down, dumpster girl. And when we land, I'm getting you fired. I know the owner of this jet company. I play golf with, well, I don't know who owns it, but my dad does. Ivana looked at Preston, then at Brock. A cold smile touched her lips. Actually, she said, reaching into her hoodie pocket, you don't know the owner. She pulled out a small black satellite phone. It wasn't the standard issue one. It was a customized Iridium model. Put that away. Brock lunged for her. Ivana sidestepped him effortlessly. She pressed a single speed dial button. She held the phone to her ear, her eyes never leaving Brock's face. Yes, this is Ivana Cortez, she said into the phone. Brock froze. The name sounded familiar. Cortez. Where had he heard that? Tech. Silicon Valley. Cortez Dynamics. The woman who revolutionized solid-state batteries. The woman worth $40 billion. No. Impossible. She was wearing a hoodie. Yes, Ivana continued, speaking to someone on the other end. I need an immediate ownership override on Flight Plan Global 7500. Tail number November 88 Zulu. She paused, listening. The pilot is compromised. Ivana said, her voice flat. He is enabling the assault of a crew member and is hostile to the aircraft owner. Brock's blood turned to ice. What? What are you doing? Ivana ignored him. Yes, I'm enacting Clause 14 of the Operator Agreement. Immediate command transfer. She lowered the phone and tapped the speaker button. A voice crackled through the tiny speaker, loud enough for the silent cabin to hear. It was the chief of operations for the charter company, a man Brock feared more than death. Captain Holloway, the voice boomed. Brock trembled. Yes, sir, I'm here. This woman is... Shut up, Holloway, the chief barked. You are speaking to Miss Ivana Cortez. She is the sole owner of the aircraft you are standing in. She purchased the company that employs you 3 days ago. Ms. Cortez is your CEO. The silence that followed was louder than the jet engines. Preston Valcourt dropped his glass. It didn't break on the carpet, but the champagne soaked into his boots. Brock looked at Ivana. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sneakers. And then he looked at her eyes. He saw it now. The authority, the confidence. It wasn't the defiance of a rebel. It was the patience of a ruler waiting for a jester to finish his dance. My CEO, Brock whispered. Ivana pocketed the phone. She took a step toward Brock. You have a choice, Captain, she said. You can go back into that cockpit, sit in the right seat, the co-pilot's seat, and let Kevin fly this plane the rest of the way to London. Or we can land in Newfoundland, as you threatened, and you can find your own way home. Swimming is free. Brock's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. And you, Ivana turned to Preston. Preston held up his hands, backing away until he hit the bulkhead. Look, lady, Miss Cortez, I didn't know. I swear I was just joking with the girl. Sarah, Ivana corrected. Her name is Sarah, and you're done drinking. She walked over to the seat. Preston had occupied the seat she had been kicked out of. She picked up the bottle of Dom Perignon, turned it upside down, and poured the remaining contents into the ice bucket. Sit down, Mr. Valcourt. Put your seatbelt on. If I hear one more word from you before we touch down at Luton, I will have you banned from every charter fleet in the Northern Hemisphere. Do not test me. Preston collapsed into his seat, buckling the belt with shaking hands. Ivana turned back to Brock. He was still standing there, pale and shaking. The cockpit captain, Ivana said, pointing forward. Kevin is waiting. And Brock? Yes, Ms. Cortez. Don't touch the controls. You're just an observer now. The cockpit of a Bombardier Global 7500 is designed to be a sanctuary of focus and calm. It is a technological marvel where hushed conversations dictate the movement of a $65 million machine. But for Captain Brock Holloway, the next 5 hours were not a sanctuary. They were a prison cell at 41,000 feet. He sat in the right seat at the first officer's station. It was a physical demotion that burned him more than any verbal reprimand could. His hands usually busy with the confident adjustments of the throttle or the flight management system, FMS rested uselessly in his lap. He had been given a direct order by the owner of the aircraft to touch nothing. To his left, Kevin, the young pilot, Brock, had spent the morning belittling was flying the plane. London Control, Global 88 Zulu, checking in level 410, Kevin said into his headset. His voice was steady, professional. It lacked the arrogant swagger Brock usually injected into his radio calls, but it was precise. Global 88 Zulu London Control radar contact. Maintain level 410, the controller replied. Brock twitched. He wanted to correct Kevin's frequency setting. He wanted to criticize the way Kevin was monitoring the fuel flow. He wanted to say something to reassert his dominance. But every time he opened his mouth, the memory of Ivana Cortez's cold, dark eyes on the other side of that satellite phone silenced him. Ivana Cortez. Brock's mind raced replaying the last 10 years of aviation news. How had he missed it? Ivana Cortez was the titan of tech, the woman who had patented a specific type of graphene conductor that was now in every electric vehicle and high-end aircraft in the world. She wasn't just rich. She was industry rich. She didn't just buy planes. She bought the companies that made the parts for the planes. And he had told her to sit in the toilet. I didn't know. Brock whispered the words, slipping out involuntarily. Kevin didn't turn his head. He kept his eyes scanned on the horizon and the primary flight display. Did you say something, Captain? Kevin asked, though the title Captain sounded heavy with irony. I said I didn't know, Brock hissed, leaning closer so the voice recorder wouldn't catch it clearly. She was wearing a hoodie. Kevin Hu comes onto a Global 7500, looking like a homeless person. It was a security risk. I was doing my job. Kevin finally glanced over. His expression wasn't sympathetic. It was pitying. She showed me her badge, Brock. You didn't look at it. You were too busy looking at yourself in the terminal window. Watch it, kid, Brock growled. I'm still your senior officer until we land. Actually, Kevin said, turning back to the controls. Per the owner's verbal directive recorded on the CVR, you are a passenger. I am the pilot in command. Please keep non-operational chatter to a minimum. I need to focus on the approach briefing. Brock slumped back, his face burning. The humiliation was total. He stared out the side window into the black abyss of the Atlantic night. He tried to convince himself that he could spin this. She's emotional, he thought. She's a woman in power, probably overcompensating. Once we land, I'll talk to the flight operations manager. I'll explain that I was enforcing strict VIP protocols. I was protecting the client, Preston Valcourt. Surely the board will see that. They can't fire a pilot with 15,000 hours of accident-free flying just because of a misunderstanding. But deep down in the pit of his stomach, where the fear lived, he knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an execution. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, the atmosphere had shifted from a frat party to a wake. Preston Valcourt was pretending to be asleep. He had pulled a cashmere blanket up to his chin, squeezing his eyes shut, terrified that if he moved, the woman in the hoodie would speak to him again. He was sobering up rapidly, and with sobriety came the horrifying realization of who he had insulted. Ivana Cortez could buy his father's entire oil company and turn it into a parking lot just for spite. Ivana sat in the club seat, her seat. She wasn't working anymore. The iPad was put away. She was currently holding a cold compress to Sarah's wrist. It's going to bruise, Ivana said softly, examining the red marks left by Preston's grip. Sarah, the flight attendant, wiped a tear from her cheek. She was still shaking. "I'm okay, Ms. Cortez. Really. I'm used to difficult passengers. It's part of the job." "No," Ivana said, firmly looking Sarah in the eye. "It is not part of the job. Serving drinks is the job. Ensuring safety is the job. Being assaulted by entitled man-children is not in your contract. I don't want to cause trouble," Sarah whispered, glancing nervously at the sleeping form of Preston. "Captain Holloway always says that if the client isn't happy, we don't get paid. He says we have to absorb the static." Ivana's expression darkened. "Captain Holloway's philosophy on static is about to be revised. Listen to me, Sarah. You are going to file a formal report when we land. I will witness it. And if you want to press charges, my legal team will handle everything. You won't pay a dime." Sarah looked at Ivana as if she were seeing a mythical creature. In 5 years of flying private, Sarah had been pinched, grabbed, yelled at, and propositioned more times than she could count. The pilots usually laughed it off or told her to toughen up. No one had ever offered her a lawyer. "Thank you," Sarah breathed. "Don't thank me," Ivana said, looking out the window as the lights of Ireland began to appear, far below tiny specks of gold in the darkness. "I should have vetted the crew better before I bought the company. I assumed professional standards were being met. That was my mistake. I'm going to fix it." She stood up and walked to the galley. She didn't go there to hide this time. She went to brew a fresh pot of coffee. She poured a cup black and walked to the cockpit door. She keyed the code and entered. The air in the cockpit was thick with tension. Brock stiffened as she entered, refusing to look at her. "Coffee, Kevin?" Ivana asked. "Yes, please, Miss Cortez, thank you," Kevin said, taking the cup. Ivana stood behind the center pedestal. She didn't offer a cup to Brock. "How's the fuel burn?" she asked Kevin, ignoring Brock entirely. "Optimal," Kevin replied. "Tailwinds are strong. We're looking at an early arrival into Luton, maybe 20 minutes ahead of schedule." "Good," Ivana said. "I have a meeting on the tarmac. I don't like to be late." She turned to leave, but paused, her hand on the doorframe. She looked at the back of Brock's head. "Captain Holloway," she said. Brock flinched. He turned slowly, his face a mask of strained politeness. "Yes, Miss Cortez. Start thinking about your resume," she said. "And I'd suggest leaving this flight off of it." The door clicked shut. Brock stared at the instrument panel, his hands trembling so hard they vibrated against his legs. Luton Airport, just north of London, is the playground for the global elite. It is where the Gulf Streams and Globals go to sleep while their owners negotiate the fate of nations in Kensington townhouses. The approach was bumpy. The British weather was living up to its reputation, low clouds, driving rain, and a crosswind that tested the skill of any pilot. Kevin was hand-flying the approach. The autopilot had been disengaged. He was wrestling the yoke, correcting for the gusts that tried to push the massive jet off the centerline. "Speed checks," Kevin muttered to himself. "Flaps 30, gear down." Brock sat on his hands. Usually he would be barking corrections. "You're too low. You're too fast. Watch the sink rate." But he said nothing. He watched the runway lights emerge from the gloom, 2 parallel lines of salvation. "Just get us on the ground," Brock thought. "Once we're on the ground, I can fix this." Kevin flared the aircraft perfectly. The back wheels kissed the wet tarmac with barely a shudder. It was a textbook, landing smoother than anything Brock had done in months. "Nice landing." Ivana's voice came over the intercom from the cabin. Brock winced. As they taxied toward the Harrods Aviation Terminal, Brock peered through the rain-streaked windshield. Usually there would be a fuel truck. and maybe a luxury van waiting for the passenger. Today the scene was different. There was a convoy. 3 black Range Rovers were parked in a phalanx formation on the ramp. Beside them stood 2 police cars, their blue lights flashing, silently reflecting off the wet pavement. And standing under large black umbrellas was a group of 4 men in suits. Brock recognized one of them. It was Arthur Pendleton, the European Director of Operations for the Charter Company. Pendleton was based in Geneva. He never came to Luton for a standard arrival. "Looks like we have a reception," Kevin said, his voice tight. "Park it there," Brock ordered, instinctively pointing to a spot. "I have the marshaller in sight," Kevin corrected, ignoring Brock's finger and following the ground crew's glowing wands. The engines whined down. The APU took over. The lights in the cabin flickered once and steadied. "Shutdown checklist complete," Kevin said. He unbuckled his harness and looked at Brock. "Good luck, Brock." It sounded like a goodbye. Brock stood up. He adjusted his tie. He put his cap on, pulling the brim low. Confidence, he told himself. Walk out there like you own the place. Deny everything. Frame it as safety protocol. He opened the cockpit door. Ivana was already at the main cabin door. The stairs were lowering with a mechanical whir. The cold, damp air of England rushed in. Preston Valcourt was standing up, looking pale. He was trying to push past Ivana. "I gotta go. I have a meeting. I need to leave." "You wait," Ivana said. She didn't touch him, but her voice nailed him to the floor. The stairs locked into place. Ivana didn't walk down immediately. She waited. 2 men in dark suits came up the stairs. They weren't ground crew. They were private security. "Ms. Cortez," the first man said, nodding respectfully. "Secure transport is ready." "Thank you, Miller," Ivana said. "Please escort Mr. Valcourt to the authorities waiting at the bottom of the stairs. The Metropolitan Police would like to have a word with him regarding an assault accusation." Preston's eyes bulged. "Police? You called the cops over a grabbed wrist. Do you know who my father is?" "I know who you are," Ivana said calmly. "And in the UK, assault is assault. Sarah has given a statement. Take him." The security team didn't ask nicely. They bracketed Preston. "Let's go, sir." "This is kidnapping. I'll sue," Preston screamed as he was practically carried down the stairs. Ivana turned to Sarah. "Go with them, Sarah. There's a representative from HR waiting in the second car. She will stay with you during the police interview and take you to a hotel. Take a week off. Paid." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Miss Cortez." She hurried down the stairs, leaving the toxic metal tube behind her. Now it was just Ivana, Brock, and Kevin left on the plane. Ivana turned to Brock. "After you, Captain." Brock swallowed hard. He walked to the door. He looked down the stairs. Arthur Pendleton was standing at the bottom, flanked by another man. Brock didn't recognize. Someone older, with a face like carved granite. Brock descended the stairs. He put on his best smile as he reached the tarmac. "Director Pendleton," Brock shouted over the sound of the wind. "Rough flight, but we got her down safely. Listen, there was a bit of a situation with a stowaway." "Silence," Pendleton said. He didn't shout, but his voice carried. Brock stopped on the last step. Pendleton stepped forward. "Captain Halloway, this is Mr. Silas Thorne, the chairman of the board." Brock's knees almost gave out. Silas Thorne was a legend. He was the money behind the money. He had flown in from where it didn't matter. He was here. "Mr. Thorne," Brock stammered. "An honor. As I was saying, Thorne stepped past Brock as if he were a traffic cone. He looked up the stairs. Ivana Cortez was descending. She walked with a grace that defied her worn-out sneakers. Thorne took off his hat. He bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Cortez, welcome to London. I apologize for the weather. And for the reception." Ivana stepped onto the tarmac. She took a deep breath of the rainy air. The weather is fine, Silas. The reception, however, was educational. She turned to face Brock. The entire group turned with her. Brock was suddenly the center of a very hostile circle. "Director Pendleton," Ivana said. "This is the pilot." "Yes, ma'am. Captain Brock Holloway. 7 years with the company." 7 years, Ivana mused. That's a long time to learn how to be a decent human being. Apparently the training didn't stick. "Ms. Cortez," Brock started, his voice cracking. "Please, if we could discuss this in private. The passenger, Mr. Valcourt, he was demanding. I was trying to manage the client. I didn't know it was you. If I had known that," Ivana cut him off, her voice sharp as a whip, "is exactly the problem, Brock." She stepped closer to him. The rain was matting down Brock's expensive hair, ruining his perfect look. "If you had known I was a billionaire," Ivana said, "you would have treated me with respect. You would have offered me champagne. You would have smiled." She pointed to the plane. "But because you thought I was a nobody, because you thought I was poor, or a servant, or just a woman in a hoodie, you treated me like garbage. You ordered me into a jump seat. You wiped down the armrest I touched like I was diseased. You prioritized a drunk man's ego over the safety of your crew." Ivana looked around at the assembled executives. "Character is not how you treat the people who can help you, Captain. Character is how you treat the people who can do absolutely nothing for you. You failed that test. Spectacularly." Brock looked at Pendleton, pleading with his eyes. "Arthur, please. A warning. A suspension. I have a mortgage. I have—" "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately," Pendleton said coldly. "Hand over your credentials." "What?" Brock gasped. "Your ID, your ramp pass, your company credit card. Now." With shaking hands, Brock unclipped his badge. He handed it to Pendleton. He felt naked. Without that badge, he was just a guy in a costume standing in the rain. Am I fired?" Brock whispered. Ivana answered. "Fired implies you might be rehired somewhere else." "No, Brock. You are being erased." She gestured to the Range Rovers. "I have already instructed legal to file a report with the Civil Aviation Authority regarding your conduct. We are submitting the cockpit voice recordings where you ignored safety protocols to appease a passenger. We are submitting the testimony of the flight attendant regarding your enablement of her assault." Ivana leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Brock could hear. "You won't fly a kite in this industry again." Brock stood there, the rain soaking through his uniform. He watched as Ivana Cortez, the woman he had tried to banish to the bathroom, turned her back on him. "Come on, Kevin," Ivana called out to the young first officer who was standing awkwardly by the landing gear. "You're driving back with us. We need to discuss your promotion." Kevin's eyes widened. "My promotion?" "Someone needs to fly this plane back to New York." Ivana smiled. "I think you're ready for the left seat. Don't you—" Kevin looked at Brock, then at Ivana. He stood up straighter. "Yes, ma'am, I believe I am." "Good. Get in the car." Ivana, Silas, Thorne, Pendleton, and Kevin climbed into the waiting luxury SUVs. The doors slammed shut with a heavy final thud. The convoy pulled away, splashing through the puddles, leaving Brock Holloway standing alone on the dark, rainy tarmac of Luton Airport. He had no ride, he had no job, and he had no umbrella. Karma didn't stop at the airport. In the digital age, karma travels at the speed of light. Brock Holloway retreated to a cheap hotel near Luton, nursing a bottle of minibar vodka and a burning sense of injustice. He convinced himself he was the victim of a vindictive billionaire. He decided to go on the offensive. He opened his laptop, logging on to Prune, the professional pilot's rumor network. He began typing a scathing, anonymous post, horror story, Global 7500 owner endangers flight for ego trip. He was ready to spin the narrative to paint Ivana Cortez as the villain. He hit enter. Then he opened YouTube. Trending at number 3 worldwide was a video titled, "Private Jet Pilot Tries to Kick Owner Off Her Own Plane. Instant Karma." Brock's blood ran cold. He clicked it. It was footage from inside the cabin. Sarah, the flight attendant, must have been recording from her apron pocket. The audio was crisp. Brock heard his own voice screaming, "Get back in the jump seat, or I will divert this plane." Then the camera panned to Ivana, calm, collected. "Actually, you don't know the owner." The video cut to the speakerphone announcement. "You are speaking to Ms. Ivana Cortez," and zoomed in on Brock's face as his soul left his body. The comments were a massacre. User Avgeek, CRM failure of the highest order. This guy gives pilots a bad name. Karma Queen, watching his arrogance shatter is the best thing I've seen all year. Legal Eagle, he enabled an assault. He belongs in jail, not a cockpit. Brock shut the laptop. His hands shaking so violently, he knocked his vodka onto the floor. It wasn't just a firing. It was a global roast. His face was now the meme for arrogance destroyed. His phone rang. It was his wife. Brock stared at the screen, letting it ring. He looked out at the rain, realizing with crushing certainty that he would never command a jet again. Meanwhile, in the boardroom of the Harrods Aviation Terminal, Ivana Cortez sat at the head of a mahogany table. "The video is trending," Silas Thorne noted. "Public sentiment is 99% in your favor." "I don't care about the PR," Ivana said, sipping her tea. "I care about the culture. Silas, I want a full audit of all flight crews, and I want Kevin promoted to captain pending his check ride. He showed moral courage when his superior failed." "Done," Silas said. "And Mr. Valcourt," Ivana's eyes hardened. "The police have him. He's being charged with common assault." "His father called," Silas warned. "Daddy Valcourt threatened to pull his fleet contract if you don't drop the charges. That's $10 million. I told him to go ahead. Ivana smiled dangerously. "I also told him that if he pushes me, I'll release the unedited cabin audio where his drunk son admits to bribing politicians." Silas choked on his water. He admitted that, "The cockpit voice recorder catches everything, Silas. I play chess, not poker." She stood up, walking to the window to watch the sun break through the English clouds. "One more thing," Ivana said. "Find out where Brock Holloway is staying. Send him a bill." "A bill for what?" "For the bottle of Dom Perignon he let Preston waste," Ivana said. "And for the cleaning of the carpet where Preston wiped his muddy boots. Holloway was responsible for the cabin. He can pay for the damages." "That's petty, isn't it?" Silas asked. "It's not petty," Ivana replied, turning back. "It's accountability. He liked to sweat the small stuff like my hoodie. I'm just returning the favor." 5 years is an eternity in the aviation industry. Fleets are retired airlines merge and names are forgotten. But for Brock Holloway, the last 5 years had been a slow, agonizing slide into oblivion. The viral video hadn't just cost him his job at Cortez Dynamics, it had radioactive his license. When your face is the global thumbnail for pilot abuse, with 40 million views, the insurance liability alone makes you unemployable. Brock had lost the house in the divorce 6 months later. His wife, tired of the brooding anger and the sudden lack of a 6-figure income, took the kids and moved to Arizona. Now, on a Tuesday night in November, Brock wasn't flying jets. He wasn't even flying propellers. He was standing on the cargo ramp of a regional airport in Ohio, wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a grease-stained jumpsuit. He was a ramp agent, $18 an hour. His job was to drive the tug the open-air tractor, that pulled pallets of freight across wet concrete. "Holloway!" the shift supervisor yelled over the roar of a departing freighter. "Bay 4. We have a diversion. VIP aircraft. Weather closed, Cleveland." Brock wiped the freezing rain from his eyes. "We don't handle private jets. We're a cargo hub." "Tell that to the tower," the supervisor spat. "They need a long runway. Go park them, and try not to look so miserable. Maybe they'll tip." Brock grunted, climbing onto the tug. He hated VIPs. He hated the sleek white machines that reminded him of the kingdom he had thrown away. As he pulled up to Bay 4, landing lights pierced the gloom. The aircraft was massive, a Bombardier Global 8000, the faster, larger successor to the 7500 he used to command. It touched down with a grace that made Brock's chest ache. The reverse thrusters roared, kicking up a mist of water, and the beast taxied toward him. Brock positioned his tug, waving his glowing wands. Left. Left. Slow. Stop. He crossed the wands. The nose gear compressed as the pilot hit the brakes. Brock walked forward to place the chocks. As he stood up, he looked at the fuselage. Painted in subtle shimmering silver below the cockpit window was the name, the Ivana B. Brock froze. The blood drained from his face. It couldn't be. Of all the airports of all the nights. The air stairs lowered, unrolling an automatic red carpet onto the wet tarmac. Brock wanted to run to vanish into the dark, but he was paralyzed by a morbid curiosity and the crushing weight of shame. The door opened. The first person to step out was the captain. He wore a uniform sharper than anything Brock had ever owned. 4 gold stripes on the epaulets, a hat with gold leaf on the brim, the mark of a senior Czech airman. The captain paused, adjusting his cap, and looked down at the ramp agent, shivering in the rain. It was Kevin. The nervous, oversized, jacket-wearing kid Brock had bullied 5 years ago was gone. In his place stood a man of 30, radiating authority and calm. Kevin descended the stairs, checking his phone, then looked up. His eyes locked onto Brock. For a moment, there was no recognition. Brock had aged, gained weight, and his face was red from cheap whiskey and cold wind. Then Kevin's eyes widened. "Brock," Kevin said. His voice wasn't mocking. It was just surprised. Brock swallowed hard, gripping his light wands. "Hello, Captain." The title tasted like ash. I didn't expect to see you here," Kevin said, stepping under the wing for shelter. "I heard you went west." "Came back," Brock mumbled, looking at his muddy boots. "Family stuff, you know." "Right." Kevin didn't ask further. He had too much class. "Nice bird," Brock said, gesturing to the plane. "The 8000, Mach .94. "She flies like a dream." Kevin nodded. "We just took delivery. Ms. Cortez likes the extra range for the Tokyo runs." Ms. Cortez. The name hung in the damp air like a guillotine blade. "Is she on board?" Brock asked. "Yes, we're heading to a climate summit in Geneva. Just a fuel stop." As if summoned, a figure appeared in the doorway. Ivana Cortez hadn't aged. If anything, she looked more formidable. She wore a tailored cream trench coat over a dark suit. She didn't look like a woman in a hoodie anymore. She looked like a woman who owned the atmosphere. She walked down the stairs holding an umbrella. "Captain," her voice cut through the wind. "Is there a problem with the refueling?" "No, Ms. Cortez," Kevin said, stepping back. "Just saying hello to an old acquaintance." Ivana stepped onto the tarmac. She turned her gaze to the ramp agent. Brock braced himself. He expected anger. He expected her to laugh. He expected her to order security to remove the trash from her sight. Ivana studied him. She took in the neon vest, the rain-soaked hair, the lines of defeat etched into his face. Her expression didn't change. It wasn't pity. It was something worse. It was indifference. "I know you," she said softly. "Yes, ma'am," Brock whispered. "You're the man who didn't like my hoodie," she said. Brock flinched. I was a different person then, Ms. Cortez. I made a mistake." "We all make mistakes, Mr. Holloway," Ivana said. "The difference is how we pay for them." She reached into her purse. Brock's heart hammered. A lawsuit, a restraining order. She pulled out a crisp white envelope and held it out. "What is this?" Brock asked, his hands trembling. "It's a scholarship voucher," Ivana said. "The Cortez Second Chance Initiative. It pays for retraining for aviation professionals who have fallen out of the industry." Brock stared at the envelope. The rain pattered against the paper, but the ink didn't run. "It won't get you back into a cockpit," Ivana said bluntly. "That trust is gone. But it covers certification for dispatch maintenance or logistics management, desk jobs, respectable jobs, jobs where you don't have to stand in the rain." Brock looked at her confusion, warring with his shattered pride. "Why, after what I did to you?" Ivana smiled, a faint, sad curvature of her lips. "Because looking at you right now gives me no joy, Brock. I don't need you to suffer for me to be successful. That's the difference between us. You thought power meant pushing people down. I know that power is the ability to lift people up, even the ones who don't deserve it." She pressed the envelope into his chest. He instinctively grabbed it with his gloved hand. "Take the course," she said. "Or don't. It's your choice. But if I see you on this ramp next time I land, I won't stop." She turned and walked back toward the stairs. Kevin looked at Brock one last time. "Take the course, Brock," he said, quietly. "She's not doing it to mock you. She's doing it because she's better than us." Kevin followed Ivana up the stairs. The door hissed shut, sealing the warmth and light inside. Brock stood alone in the dark. The rain hammered against his helmet. He looked down at the envelope. It was dry, protected by the heavy plastic of his glove. He watched as the engines of the Ivana B fired up. The blast of warm air hit him, drying his face for a split second before the cold returned. He waved his wands, signaling them out, watching as the plane taxied away, a glittering star moving against the black void. He watched until it lifted off, disappearing into the clouds, heading for Geneva, for summits, for the future. "Hey, Holloway," the supervisor screamed from the building. "Toilet truck needs a driver for Bay 2. Get moving." Brock looked at the grim grey cargo terminal. He looked at his tug. Then he looked at the envelope again. He could throw it away. He could hold on to his bitterness like a shield. He could tell himself she was just showing off, or he could admit that she was right. Brock Holloway unzipped his jumpsuit and tucked the envelope into his inner pocket, right against his heart. He climbed back onto the tug. "I'm coming," he muttered, shifting the gear. But not for long. For the first time in 5 years, as he drove through the rain, Brock Holloway didn't look down at the ground. He looked up. The karma hadn't been the firing. The karma hadn't been the poverty. The ultimate karma was the mercy. Because the mercy forced him to finally see the truth. He had never been the captain of anything until he learned to command himself. And miles above him, in seat 1A, the woman in the hoodie adjusted her reading light, opened her book on Stoic philosophy, and turned the page. And that is the story of Captain Brock Holloway and the billionaire he tried to humble. It's a powerful reminder that in the altitude of life, your attitude determines your cruising level. Brock thought his uniform made him superior, but he learned the hard way that true status isn't about what you wear. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. The most dangerous turbulence isn't in the sky, it's in the ego. Ivana Cortez didn't just win because she had money. She won because she had composure. She showed us that the best revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's showing your enemy exactly how small they are by being the bigger person. If this story gave you chills, or if you've ever dealt with someone like Brock, hit that like button and share this video. It helps the channel grow and lets us bring you more dramatic stories of justice and karma. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a flight. Thanks for watching and stay grounded.